There is a plant sitting in more American backyards than almost anything else you can grow in shade. It costs $10 at any garden center. It comes back every single year without being asked. It lives for decades if you treat it right, and people are quietly ruining it right now. In August, during the exact month when the damage is hardest to see and easiest to make. Not on purpose, not from neglect exactly, from a specific set of mistakes that almost every gardener makes with hostas, usually because the information available is either incomplete, vague, or simply wrong about what this plant actually needs during the hottest stretch of the growing season. Here is what makes this particularly frustrating. Hostas are genuinely one of the most forgiving plants you can grow. They tolerate poor soil. They tolerate drought once established. They tolerate being divided, moved, ignored, and forgotten about for weeks at a time. When a hosta is struggling in August, it is almost never the plant's fault. It is almost always one of the 10 mistakes we are going to go through right now. If your hostas look smaller than they should, if the leaves are burning at the edges, yellowing through the middle, or simply never filling out the way the tag promised, every single one of those problems has a specific cause and a specific fix. And August is actually the ideal month to identify them, because this is when the symptoms are most visible. Before we start, drop your USDA zone in the comments right now and tell me what your hostas actually look like today. Green and healthy, showing burn at the leaf edges, yellowing in the center, or something else entirely. I want to know what we are working with across different climates, and I read every single one. If you are new here, subscribe before we get into this. This channel is built around real answers to real plant problems, the kind that actually change what your garden looks like from one season to the next. Hit the bell and the next video finds you automatically. Let's go. Mistake 1. Planting them in too much sun and not understanding which type of hosta is most vulnerable. This is the single most common hosta mistake in American home gardening, and it happens for a completely understandable reason. You buy the plant in spring, the garden center has it sitting in full sun on an outdoor display rack where it looks beautiful and healthy, and you assume sun is fine because the plant is clearly surviving it right now. It is not fine, not for most hostas. And August is the month the consequences become undeniable. Hostas evolved as woodland understory plants. In nature, they grow beneath a canopy of trees, receiving filtered light, dappled shade, and at most a couple of hours of gentle morning sun before the canopy closes the light off. When you put that same plant in a spot that receives 6, 7, or 8 hours of direct summer sun, especially afternoon sun in zones 6 and warmer, the leaves respond with a very specific and very telling set of symptoms. The edges turn crispy and brown. The color bleaches from rich deep green or blue-green to a washed-out, tired yellow-green. In severe cases, the entire leaf surface develops a papery, translucent quality like it has been scorched from the inside out. Here is the insider rule that experienced hosta growers use and almost never share publicly. The bluer the hosta, the more shade it requires. Blue hostas like Halcyon, Elegans, and Crassa Regal get their color from a waxy coating on the leaf surface, a substance called epicuticular wax that literally melts off under extended direct sun exposure. Once that wax is gone, the leaf has lost its blue color permanently for that season. The plant will not recover its blue coloring until it pushes new growth the following spring, and even then, only if it has been moved to an appropriate location. If you planted a blue hosta in spring and it has turned green or gray-green by August, that is exactly what happened. The sun cooked off the wax that gave you the color you paid for. Gold and chartreuse hostas are on the opposite end of the tolerance spectrum. They actually need some sun to develop their full color, handling 3 to 4 hours of morning sun quite well and sometimes requiring it to achieve their best gold tones. Green varieties fall in the middle. The rule for applying this in practice is straightforward. Look at the label color of the variety you own and calibrate accordingly. Blues need the most shade, 2 hours of morning sun at most, with full shade through the afternoon. Greens handle partial shade comfortably. Golds and chartreuses can take more direct light without the same risk of losing what makes them distinctive. If your hostas are in the wrong spot, the fix is a fall move. Hostas transplant exceptionally well in early fall, when temperatures drop and the plant is winding down for the season. Move them to a shadier location, and the following spring you will see a completely different plant. Bigger, healthier, the right color, doing what it was always capable of doing. Mistake 2. Planting the crown too deep or letting mulch bury it over time. This mistake is quiet. It does not announce itself immediately. The plant goes in, looks fine for several weeks, and then simply never takes off the way it should. It stays small. Growth is slow. The gardener spends the next 2 or 3 seasons wondering what is wrong with the soil or the light when the answer is a single inch of depth at the base of the plant. The crown of a hosta, the point where the roots meet the emerging shoots, needs to sit right at soil level or no more than half an inch below it. When it goes deeper than that, the plant expends enormous energy pushing new growth up through excess soil before it can begin photosynthesizing. Some hostas will tolerate this and eventually work their way upward over a few seasons. Others will simply sit there, permanently stunted, never performing at the level the variety is genuinely capable of. The most common way this happens is not at planting. It is through mulching. The plant goes in at the correct depth, but then 3 or 4 inches of fresh mulch gets added every season, piled right up against the crown, until the plant is effectively buried an inch or 2 deeper than it started. This is sometimes called volcano mulching, and it affects hostas more significantly than almost any other perennial in the shade bed. Walk through your garden right now and look at the base of each hosta. You should be able to see the point where the roots begin. If the crown is hidden under mulch, pull the mulch back 4 to 6 inches from the crown specifically, not from the outer leaf spread, from the central growing point. That single adjustment, taking less than 2 minutes per plant, has revived hostas that gardeners had written off as permanently weak varieties when the real problem was burial depth. Mistake 3. Overwatering young plants while misreading the symptoms as drought. This is the counterintuitive one, and it causes real damage specifically in August when the instinct to water is at its strongest. Hostas do love consistent moisture. Established hostas handle drought better than most people realize, but young hostas, plants in their first or second season in the ground, are significantly more vulnerable to overwatering than most gardeners understand. When a newly planted hosta sits in consistently soggy soil through August heat, the roots that are still developing cannot access the oxygen they need to function. They begin to rot at the tips. The plant cannot take up nutrients through a compromised root system, and the symptoms that appear above the soil line look almost identical to drought stress. Yellowing leaves, wilting in the heat of the day, slow, stunted growth. This causes many gardeners to respond by watering even more, which accelerates the exact problem they are trying to solve. The biological mechanism here is the same one that applies to almost all container and in-ground overwatering situations. Roots grow toward moisture, a process called hydrotropism, which means light daily watering keeps roots shallow and near the surface, where conditions are most volatile. Deep, infrequent watering drives roots downward into cooler, more stable soil, where they become genuinely drought-resistant over time. The correct approach in year 1 and 2 is to water deeply once per week in normal August conditions, and to always check the soil before adding water, rather than watering on a calendar. Push 2 fingers into the soil near the base of the plant. If moisture is still present from the previous watering, leave it alone entirely. Let the top 2 inches dry out between waterings. The roots will grow downward in search of moisture, which is exactly the deep root structure you want going into year 3 when the plant becomes genuinely self-sufficient. Once a hosta is truly established, 2 full seasons in the ground, it becomes one of the more drought-tolerant shade plants you can grow. Getting through those first 2 seasons correctly without overwatering is what unlocks that toughness. Mistake 4. Ignoring slug damage until it becomes severe. You walk out one morning in August and your hostas look like someone spent the night going through them with a hole punch. Dozens of small, irregular holes across every leaf, edges ragged and chewed. The plant looks attacked because it was, just not by anything you are likely to see during daylight hours. Slugs feed exclusively at night and in wet conditions. By morning, they have retreated into the soil, under mulch, beneath nearby rocks, anywhere cool and damp that gives them shelter through the day. The damage they leave behind is distinctive once you know what you are looking at, but many first-time hosta growers assume they are dealing with a disease, a fungal problem, or a nutrient deficiency, none of which hole punching causes in that pattern. The real mistake is not getting slugs. Every shaded, moist garden has them. The mistake is ignoring the early signs until the damage is extensive and then applying the wrong remedy too late in the season to matter. Here is what actually works, starting with the approach most people overlook completely: variety selection. Hostas with thick, heavily corrugated, textured leaves are dramatically less appealing to slugs than thin-leaved varieties. The texture and thickness make the leaf harder to rasp through, which is the physical mechanism slugs use to feed. Sum and Substance, Empress Wu, Francis Williams, and Halcyon are all noticeably more resistant than thin-leaved types like Lancifolia. If you are planting new hostas and slug pressure is a known issue in your garden, building your variety selection around thick leaf types is your most durable first line of defense. For existing infestations, iron phosphate-based slug bait sold under brand names like Sluggo is the correct tool. It is safe around children, pets, and wildlife because it breaks down into iron and phosphate, both of which are natural soil components. Apply it around the perimeter of affected plants at the first sign of damage, not after the leaves are already destroyed. Reapply after heavy rain. One thing that makes slug problems dramatically worse in August specifically is mulch. Thick mulch piled against the crown is slug habitat. It holds the moisture and darkness they need to remain active and sheltered through the day. Pull the mulch back from the crown and you remove the protection that makes your garden so hospitable to them in the first place. Before we go further, I want to ask you something specific. Tell me in the comments whether you have ever seen slug damage on your hostas and what you tried to fix it. I want to know which solutions people have actually used in real yards and which ones worked versus which ones were a waste of money. Whatever your experience is, share it below. And if this video is already telling you things about your hostas that you have been wondering about for seasons, subscribe right now. Hit the bell so the next video finds you when it goes live. We go this deep on this kind of problem every single week. Mistake 5. Fertilizing hostas in August with the wrong product at the wrong time. Most gardeners know hostas benefit from fertilizer. Far fewer understand that fertilizing at the wrong point in the season, or with the wrong nutrient balance, actively damages a plant that has spent all summer building toward its fall energy storage cycle. Here is the August-specific context that makes this mistake more significant than it would be in May. By August, a well-managed hosta is beginning to shift its biological priority from above-ground growth toward underground energy storage. The root system is building the reserves that will fuel next spring's emergence, and the leaf mass is beginning the slow process of energy transfer downward toward the crown. This is the natural end-of-season cycle, and it is the reason hostas come back bigger and better every year. High nitrogen fertilizer applied in August disrupts that cycle by stimulating the plant to push new leafy growth at exactly the moment it should be transitioning toward storage. That new growth is soft, lush, and extremely vulnerable to the first cool nights of late August and September. It does not have enough time to harden off before temperatures drop, and it often sustains cold damage that leaves the plant entering dormancy in a weakened state. If your hostas have been fertilized heavily through July and into August, you may notice unusually soft, floppy new growth at the center of the plant that looks out of place given the time of year. That is the direct result of nitrogen pushing new production when the plant is trying to wind down. The correct approach for August is to stop all high nitrogen feeding by early August at the latest. If you want to support the plant through its energy storage phase, a single application of a low nitrogen, high phosphorus product in very early August is beneficial. Phosphorus supports root development and energy storage directly, which is exactly what the plant is doing right now. After that single application, leave it alone until the following spring. Mistake 6. Misreading the difference between heat stress and actual disease. August is the peak month for several conditions that affect hostas, and getting the diagnosis right before you treat is the difference between a quick fix and weeks of wasted effort on the wrong remedy. Heat scorch and actual fungal disease look superficially similar. Both produce brown or yellow discoloration on the leaves. The distinction is in the pattern and the margin. Heat scorch, which is simply the physical damage from too much sun or hot, dry wind on the leaf surface, produces browning that starts at the outer edges of the leaf and moves inward. The margin between damaged and healthy tissue is fairly gradual. There are no distinct spots or lesions, just a general fade from green to brown moving from the outside in. The fix is shade and consistent moisture. It is cosmetic damage. The plant is not sick. Hosta virus X is the one disease every hosta grower needs to know by name. It is a genuine viral infection with no cure, and it spreads through contact, primarily through tools used for division that have not been sanitized between plants. Symptoms appear as a mottled ink bleed pattern within the leaf, irregular dark green streaks running through lighter green or yellow tissue. The pattern often follows the veins. Some gardeners find it visually interesting and keep affected plants thinking it is a new color variation. It is not. Any plant with confirmed hosta virus X needs to be removed and disposed of in the trash, not composted, and every tool used on or near it needs to be wiped down with a bleach solution before it touches another plant. Anthracnose is a fungal disease that causes irregular brown spots with darker margins in a target-like pattern on the leaf, appearing most commonly in hot, wet August conditions. It is rarely fatal but spreads rapidly in crowded plantings with poor airflow. The treatment is improving air circulation, removing heavily affected leaves from the garden rather than letting them drop and decompose in the bed, and applying a copper-based fungicide if the infection is spreading aggressively. Knowing which of these three things you are looking at determines whether you need shade, a bin bag, or a fungicide. Getting it wrong costs you time, money, and potentially healthy plants nearby. Tell me in the comments which of these three your hostas are currently showing. Brown edges, ink bleed patterns within the leaves, or distinct spotted lesions. Tell me what you are seeing and your zone, and I will tell you exactly what you are dealing with. Mistake 7. Dividing too early, or never dividing at all. Most gardeners fall into one of two camps with hosta division. Either they divide too soon, pulling apart a plant that has not yet reached its full size or established a strong enough root system to tolerate the stress of being split, or they never divide at all, watching a once vigorous clump slowly decline over years as the root mass becomes overcrowded and the center of the plant dies out. Both approaches produce the same result over time: a hosta that performs significantly below what it is actually capable of. The correct timing for division is when the clump has been in the ground for at least 3 to 4 years and has clearly reached its mature spread. The visible sign that division is genuinely needed is a weakening center. The middle of the clump produces noticeably smaller, less vigorous shoots, while the outer edges still look healthy. That asymmetry tells you the root mass has become too congested to sustain production across the entire plant. August is not the month to divide. It is the month to plan. Mark the clumps in your garden that are showing that weakening center pattern, because those are your fall division candidates. Early September through mid-October, once temperatures have dropped consistently below 80 degrees Fahrenheit, is the ideal window to lift and divide. The plant is slowing its above-ground activity, root stress is significantly lower than in summer, and the divisions have several weeks to re-establish before the ground freezes. The financial side of this deserves a moment. One established hosta clump divided correctly can yield 4, 6, sometimes 8 viable new plants, depending on the original size of the clump. At current nursery prices of $10 to $18 per plant, a single morning of fall division work in your own garden can produce $40 to $150 worth of plants for free. Every division you dig up is either a new planting somewhere else in your yard or a gift to another gardener who wants hostas but has not started yet. Mistake 8. Cutting the leaves back in early fall before the plant has finished using them. Every August and September, the tidying instinct kicks in. Clean the garden up, cut things back, get ahead of the fall cleanup before winter arrives. And with hostas, this instinct causes a specific problem that carries directly into the following spring. Hosta leaves, even as they yellow and die back in autumn, are actively transferring stored energy downward into the crown and root system. That process continues until the first hard frost physically stops it. Gardeners who cut the foliage back in August or September, while the leaves are still in the process of dying back naturally, interrupt that energy transfer at exactly the moment it matters most for next year's performance. The plant goes into winter with less stored energy than it should have. Next spring's emergence is noticeably slower, and the initial leaf size is smaller than it would have been from a plant that was allowed to complete its natural cycle. Leave the foliage standing until after the first hard frost has fully collapsed it. At that point, the process is complete and the leaves have no further biological function. Cut them back then and remove the cut foliage from the bed entirely rather than leaving it as mulch. Fallen hosta leaves can harbor slug eggs and fungal spores over winter that emerge as problems in spring. Take them out of the garden altogether. Mistake 9. Ignoring the soil before planting and expecting the plant to compensate. This mistake is made before the hosta ever goes in the ground, which is what makes it the hardest to diagnose once the plant is established and performing poorly. Shaded soil, particularly the soil beneath mature trees where most hostas end up, is almost always compacted, dry, and low in organic matter. Tree roots aggressively compete for moisture and nutrients across the entire root zone. The surface layer of soil beneath a mature tree canopy is frequently hard-packed and depleted in a way that garden soil in a sunny bed rarely is. Hostas are tolerant plants, but they were built for rich, woodland floor soil, deep in organic matter, loose in texture, and consistently moist. Planting directly into compacted, depleted soil beneath a tree and expecting the hosta to compensate for those conditions is asking the plant to perform at a level the environment will not support. The correct preparation is working 4 to 6 inches of mature compost into the planting area before installation, not peat moss, which acidifies without adding meaningful nutrition, and not fresh wood chips, which compete for nitrogen as they decompose. Mature compost, the dark, crumbly, earthy-smelling material that has fully broken down. This single soil preparation step changes the establishment speed, the first-year vigor, and the long-term size potential of every hosta you plant more significantly than almost any other variable. If your hostas are established in poor soil and you cannot till and amend without disturbing the roots, top dressing with an inch of compost each spring around the drip line of the plant is the next best approach and improves soil structure meaningfully over 2 or 3 seasons of consistent application. Mistake 10. Choosing the wrong variety for the actual space available. This last mistake is made at the garden center before the plant ever goes in the ground, which is exactly what makes it so difficult to diagnose years later when the problem becomes obvious. Hostas range from miniatures that sit in a space the size of a teacup to giants that reach 4 feet tall and 6 feet across at full maturity. The plant tag tells you the mature size, but that size is reached over 5 to 7 years, not in one season. A small, manageable-looking plant in a 4-inch pot can eventually become something that dominates an entire garden bed, crowding out everything around it and requiring aggressive division every few years just to keep it within its original boundary. The opposite mistake is equally common and equally frustrating. A gardener buys a large, impressive variety, Empress Wu or Sum in substance, and plants it in a space that is simply too small for what it will eventually become. The plant spends years struggling against its own boundaries, never reaching the performance it is genuinely capable of because the space cannot accommodate the root system it needs. Here is a practical variety guide by size category that the garden center rarely provides clearly. Miniature hostas, staying under 6 inches at maturity, include blue mouse ears, Pandora's box, and cameo. These are correct for container planting, edging a narrow path, or filling small defined spaces without overpowering adjacent plants. Small hostas, reaching 6 to 12 inches, include tiny tears, elfin and stiletto. Right for front-of-border placement and smaller shade beds. Medium hostas, 12 to 24 inches, represent the most versatile category and include the widely available August Moon, Patriot, and Francis Williams. These are the workhorses of most home shade gardens and the varieties most likely to be correctly sized for a standard residential planting. Large and giant hostas, reaching above 30 inches with spreads of 4 to 6 feet, include Sum in substance, Empress Wu, and Sage. These need to be planned for in terms of their eventual footprint before they go in the ground. Planted correctly in a space large enough to accommodate them, these varieties create the dramatic architectural presence that makes a shade garden genuinely impressive. Planted in a space too small for their eventual size, they create years of management problems. Before you buy, measure the space. Research the specific variety's mature dimensions at full establishment, not the dimensions in year 2. Then match the variety to the space from the beginning and save yourself years of unnecessary division and replanting. Let me bring this together before you go. 10 mistakes, every single one of them happening in backyards right now in August. Every single one of them fixable. A hosta in too much sun can be moved this fall. A crown, buried under mulch, can be uncovered this afternoon. Overwatering can stop today. Slug damage can be addressed this week before it worsens. August fertilizing can stop right now. A disease can be correctly identified and treated before it spreads. Division candidates can be marked today for September action. Early fall cutback can be avoided by simply leaving the foliage alone until frost takes it. Poor soil can be improved with a top dressing of compost this weekend, and a wrong variety for the space problem can be solved through division and relocation next spring. Hostas are not difficult plants, they are misunderstood ones. And the difference between a hosta that sits there looking tired and small for years and one that fills a shaded corner with dramatic, stunning foliage every single season almost always comes down to one or two of the things we just covered. Here is what I want from you in the comments before you go. Tell me which of these 10 mistakes is the one you recognize in your own garden right now. And tell me your zone or state while you are at it, because I want to know where everyone is dealing with this and whether there are regional patterns in which mistakes come up most often. I read every single comment, and your answers directly shape what this channel covers next. If this video gave you real answers to things your hostas have needed for a season or more, subscribe right now. Next week, this channel goes just as deep into the next problem your garden needs answered. Hit the bell and it will find you automatically. And if you know someone who has been fighting struggling hostas for years without knowing why, send this to them. Not for the view, because that person has very likely been making one of these 10 mistakes for seasons and does not know which one, and this video is the fastest way to find out. Go check on those hostas. You already know exactly what to look for now.